Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. You want time together? I want a month without you. Deal? That's what my wife, Melissa, said one Friday evening, smirking across the kitchen table like she was holding all the cards. She spoke the words like they were nothing, like tossing a grenade just to see what I'd do. I stared at her for a moment, then nodded once. Done. That single word wiped the smile from her face. She expected begging, outrage, maybe a desperate plea. Instead, she got silence. And the next morning, I was gone. It wasn't a dramatic exit. No slammed doors, no suitcases hurled into the trunk at midnight. I packed quietly, deliberately. Essentials first, then documents, then the things that mattered only to me. I left her everything else. The clothes she liked to borrow, the furniture she swore she'd chosen, the trinkets she thought defined our marriage. By sunrise, my side of the closet was bare, the dresser drawers empty. When Melissa finally woke up, she found a house that felt colder, emptier, and she didn't even realize it yet. For years, she had toyed with the idea of independence. New hobbies, new friends, nights out that stretched later and later. She spoke about finding herself, while I paid for the roof over her head, the car she drove, the lifestyle she flaunted online. And now she wanted a month to pretend I didn't exist. Fine. I gave her exactly that, but not the way she expected. She thought she'd get freedom with a safety net. Instead, she got silence. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't ask where she went or who she was with. I vanished from her daily orbit like I'd never been there. But the truth was, I was watching. Not with suspicion, not with jealousy, just clarity. I wanted to see what she would do when the man she took for granted disappeared. The first few days, she played her role well. Posts on social media about self-care and independence, dinners with friends, gym selfies captioned with quotes about growth. I scrolled through them once, then closed the app. She wasn't growing. She was performing. And performances always end. By the end of the first week, the cracks began to show. A mutual friend sent me a screenshot. Melissa at a rooftop bar, cocktail in hand, laughter spilling out of her like she was 19 again. But it wasn't the drink or the smile that caught my attention. It was the hand on her waist, half hidden at the edge of the frame. A man's hand. I didn't flinch. I didn't rage. I didn't even reply to the friend. I just stared at the photo for a long time, calm and steady. Melissa wanted a month without me. She was about to learn what that really meant. Melissa's first week of freedom looked like a highlight reel. At least, that's how she framed it. Pictures of cocktails, selfies with friends, captions about finally breathing again. To anyone scrolling by, she looked radiant, like she had shed some imaginary weight. But I knew her too well. I knew the difference between real joy and staged euphoria. What she posted wasn't happiness, it was performance. And performances always crack when the audience stops clapping. Meanwhile, I didn't just vanish from her world. I dismantled my role in it piece by piece. Our joint account became mine again. The automatic payments she depended on, subscriptions, utilities, little luxuries, were canceled. I wasn't cruel about it. I didn't touch her personal money. I simply stepped away from the invisible labor I had always shouldered. If she wanted a month without me, she would live it fully, responsibilities included. The second week brought the first ripple. Melissa called me late one evening. I didn't answer. She tried again the next morning, her voice sharp on voicemail, asking why the internet bill hadn't been paid. I let the message sit unanswered. By the next day, she was posting from a coffee shop, complaining about spotty Wi-Fi. Her friends probably thought it was a minor inconvenience. I knew better. For Melissa, it was the first reminder of just how much I had handled without recognition. But the photo that really told the story came from another friend. Melissa at a rooftop lounge, leaning close to a man I didn't recognize. His arm draped casually across the back of her chair, his body angled toward hers. She looked alive, almost glowing, her laughter frozen mid-frame. To anyone else, it was harmless. To me, it was confirmation. She wasn't using her month to find herself. She was auditioning replacements. I didn't confront her. I didn't text. I didn't even mention it to the friend who sent it. Instead, I saved the image in a private folder. Evidence. Maybe. Or maybe just a reminder for myself that I wasn't imagining her betrayal. At work, people began to notice my change. I stayed late, hit the gym after hours, even caught up with old friends I hadn't seen in years. When they asked how things were at home, I smiled and said everything was fine. My calm unnerved them, but that was the point. I wasn't broken. I wasn't waiting. I was already moving forward. By the end of the second week, Melissa tried texting again. Just a casual, "Hope you're doing okay," followed by a smiley face. I left it on read. And in that silence, I knew she felt it. The first flicker of doubt, the first whisper of fear. Because for the first time in her life, she had asked for space, and I had given her exactly what she wanted. But space has a way of showing people what they really lost. And soon, Melissa would see it too. By the third week, the shine of Melissa's so-called freedom began to fade. The posts slowed down. The smiles in her pictures looked thinner, less effortless. She went from rooftop bars to quiet coffee shops, from groups of friends to solo snapshots. The captions shifted too. No more bold affirmations about independence. Now they were vague quotes about uncertain journeys and learning to stand alone. To anyone else, it was just filler content. To me, it was the sound of her facade cracking. Her texts became more frequent. At first, casual check-ins, asking if I was eating well, if I'd caught the game we used to watch together. I ignored them. Then they grew sharper, laced with passive-aggressive guilt. She accused me of acting childish, of trying to punish her. I let the words sit unread. Silence became my weapon, sharper than any argument. One night, around midnight, she called me 3 times in a row. I didn't answer. When I checked my phone in the morning, her last message was just 3 words. "Are you there?" That was the first time I felt her panic. Not anger, not arrogance, fear. She had expected me to hover, to linger at the edge of her new life, waiting for scraps. Instead, I was gone, and she was realizing it. Meanwhile, I had rebuilt my own rhythm. Work, gym, dinners with friends who hadn't seen me laugh in years. The more I pulled away, the stronger I became. My world expanded as hers shrank. I no longer thought about what she was doing, who she was with. It didn't matter. She was no longer the center. I was. By Friday, her mask slipped in front of others. A mutual friend ran into her at the grocery store and later told me she seemed off, distracted, tired, her cart half empty, like she couldn't focus long enough to shop. She had told them she was just adjusting to changes. But even her voice cracked. Word spreads fast in small circles. Melissa wasn't glowing anymore. She was unraveling, and people were noticing. That weekend, she finally broke the silence with a different tone. A softer one. She texted me a photo of the cat curled on the couch, followed by, "House feels empty without you." I read it once, then put my phone face down. I didn't reply, because the truth was, the house didn't feel empty. Not for me. For the first time in years, it felt free. And the longer Melissa sat alone in that silence, the more she would understand just how much of her world had depended on a man who no longer lived there. By the start of the 4th week, Melissa had shifted from pretending to thrive to openly scrambling. Her independence had begun to feel like exile. The woman who once smirked across the table, demanding a month without me, was now reaching for anyone who would listen. I heard from her sister first. She called me, her voice careful, saying Melissa seemed lost, and maybe I should check in. I told her simply that Melissa had asked for space, and I was giving her exactly that. The pause on the other end was heavy. Her sister didn't argue. She just sighed and said she hoped Melissa knew what she was doing. Melissa wasn't used to losing the narrative. She tried to spin it with her friends, telling them I'd grown cold, that I was punishing her unfairly. But people aren't blind. They'd seen her rooftop photos, the late-night outings, the new man's hand on her waist. They knew the story didn't add up. One mutual friend even sent me a message saying, "She's making herself look worse the more she talks." I didn't respond, but I smiled when I read it. She was unraveling in public, and all I had to do was stay silent. The breaking point came at a dinner with friends. I hadn't planned to go, but Melissa insisted I show up. She thought surrounding us with people would pressure me to play the part of the supportive husband. Instead, it backfired. Midway through the meal, she tried to make a joke at my expense, laughing too loudly about how I'd become a ghost lately. Everyone's eyes turned to me. I set my fork down, looked at her calmly, and said, "You told me you wanted a month without me. I'm just keeping my promise." The silence at that table was suffocating. Melissa's smile collapsed, her friends shifting uncomfortably in their seats. She excused herself, rushing to the restroom, leaving me to finish my meal in peace. Nobody spoke until she came back, her face blotchy, her eyes red. And when she tried to steer the conversation back to normal, no one followed. For the first time, Melissa wasn't the center of the spotlight. She was the cautionary tale. When we got home, she slammed the bedroom door and cried loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I let the sound wash through the house like another storm passing overhead. Because in that moment, I understood something she was only just realizing. She hadn't asked for a month without me. She had asked for a month to discover what life really looked like without the man who had held her world together. And that was exactly what she got. By the 5th week, Melissa's world had shrunk into something unrecognizable. The confidence she flaunted in those first days of freedom had evaporated, replaced by a nervous edge that clung to her every movement. She had once bragged about living independently, about being strong enough to stand on her own. Now the cracks were wide enough for anyone to see. It started with the bills. She hadn't noticed how many of them I handled in silence, how many details of her life ran smoothly because I kept them invisible. One morning, she called me in a panic, saying the water had been shut off. She was furious, her voice sharp, demanding to know why I hadn't fixed it. I let her finish her rant before replying with a single line. You wanted a month without me. This is what that looks like. Then I ended the call. She tried to mask the unraveling online. Gone were the glamorous photos with friends and cocktails. Now she posted vague captions about being tested by life and learning who really cares. But her friends weren't buying it. One of them reached out to me, saying Melissa seemed off, tired, thinner, unfocused. They asked if she was okay. I just said she was getting what she asked for. They didn't press further. Her social life began to collapse next. Invitations stopped coming. People grew tired of her endless venting, her attempts to twist the story in her favor. Even her sister kept her distance, frustrated by the constant late-night calls. Melissa, who once thrived on being the center of attention, was now being quietly pushed to the sidelines. And she hated it. At home, the silence had become unbearable for her. She paced through the house like a trapped animal, starting conversations with herself just to break the stillness. She left notes on the counter, little apologies scribbled in shaky handwriting, reminders of memories we once shared. I didn't acknowledge them. I walked past them as if they weren't even there. The breaking moment came on a Friday night. I returned home later than usual to find her sitting at the kitchen table, mascara streaked, her eyes swollen from crying. She whispered that she missed me, that she wanted things to go back to the way they were. I stood in the doorway, calm and steady, and told her there was no going back. Not after everything. Her face crumpled, and she buried it in her hands, sobbing like she finally understood the cost of her freedom. Melissa had asked for a month without me. Now she was living it in full, stripped of comfort, stripped of validation, stripped of me. And she was realizing too late that the emptiness she felt wasn't punishment. It was just the absence of everything she had taken for granted. Melissa's desperation took a new shape in the 6th week. She stopped pretending to be strong and started clawing for control in clumsy, frantic ways. One morning, I found her in the garage, rummaging through boxes I hadn't touched in years. She claimed she was looking for something of hers, but I could see the truth in her eyes. She was searching for proof that I still cared, some trace of attachment she could weaponize. She found nothing. Later that week, she tried to use affection as a leash. She dressed up the way she used to when we first met, cooking dinner and pouring wine as if staging a memory. I sat across from her, polite, composed, but untouched. She laughed nervously, filling the silence with small talk that didn't land. I ate, thanked her for the meal, and walked away. Her face dropped like I'd pulled the rug out from under her, because she realized seduction wasn't a currency I accepted anymore. Her next move was anger. She stormed into my office one evening, waving her phone, accusing me of humiliating her in front of everyone by disappearing. She shouted, pacing the room, demanding answers. I didn't give her any. I closed my laptop, stood, and walked past her. No yelling, no fight, just absence. Her fury collapsed into tears the second I left. The cracks widened in public. She called her mother from the grocery store, loud enough for strangers to hear, complaining that she was being abandoned. But even her mother, who once defended her at every turn, sounded weary. Word spread quickly. Melissa wasn't the independent woman she had pretended to be. She was unraveling, and people could see it. By the weekend, She tried one last tactic. She waited by the door when I came home, eyes red, holding out a photo album filled with pictures from our early years together. Her voice trembled as she said she didn't want to lose everything we had built. I looked at the photos, then at her, and said calmly, "You already gave it up." I walked past her, leaving the album open on the floor. Melissa's fight wasn't strength, it was desperation. Every move she made to pull me back only pushed her further into the void she had created. And the harder she tried to hold on, the clearer it became that she no longer had anything left to hold. Melissa's next strategy was to turn her family and friends into weapons. She thought if she could make me look like the villain, I'd fold under the weight of their judgment. But she miscalculated. Her mother called first, her voice hesitant. She said Melissa was struggling, that maybe I was being too hard on her. I told her calmly that Melissa had asked for a month without me, and I was honoring her request. The silence that followed was long. Her mother sighed, almost defeated, and simply said she hoped her daughter understood what she had done. Not long after, her brother Mark showed up at the house. He was angry, pacing on the porch before knocking. He accused me of freezing Melissa out, of being cruel. I let him vent, his voice rising with every word. When he finally paused, I repeated Melissa's exact words. She told me she wanted a month without me. Mark froze, his anger draining into something closer to disbelief. He muttered that he'd talked to her, then walked away without looking back. Melissa didn't know it, but the cracks in her support system were already spreading. She tried again with her friends. She invited me to a group dinner, hoping to corner me in public, to paint herself as the wounded wife and me as the cold, unfeeling husband. But the plan unraveled quickly. When she joked too loudly about me being a ghost lately, her friends looked at me, expecting a reaction. I set my fork down, met her gaze, and said evenly, "She asked me to disappear for a month. I'm just giving her what she wanted." The silence that followed was brutal. Melissa's smile collapsed, and her friends exchanged uneasy glances. She excused herself, retreating to the restroom, while I finished my meal in peace. When she returned, her mask was cracked beyond repair. The conversation no longer orbited around her, and for once, she wasn't the center of attention. At home, she lashed out. She accused me of embarrassing her, of turning everyone against her. But her voice shook, breaking into sobs before she could finish. I didn't answer. I walked upstairs and left her shouting into an empty room. Melissa thought she could rebuild her control through others. Instead, every attempt only deepened her humiliation. The more she tried to rewrite the story, the clearer it became that she had lost the script, and I was no longer playing my part. By the 8th week, Melissa's desperation had shed every layer of dignity. She no longer tried to mask her panic with jokes or staged smiles. Now her efforts were raw, clumsy, and painfully transparent. One evening, she waited for me in the living room, dressed in the same outfit she wore on our first date. She had even curled her hair the way she used to, forcing a smile as I walked in. The table was set with candles, wine, and a meal she hadn't cooked in years. She tried to laugh, tried to remind me of the past, but her voice wavered, betraying the fear underneath. I sat, ate quietly, thanked her for the food, and stood to leave. Her eyes filled with tears as she whispered that she didn't know how to fix this. I gave her nothing. The next day, she took her desperation public. She showed up at my office unannounced, demanding to talk. Colleagues watched as she raised her voice, accusing me of abandoning her, of making her look like a fool. I didn't defend myself. I didn't even argue. I simply told her we'd speak at home, then walked past her into a meeting. The look on her face as the door closed was a mix of rage and humiliation. She had tried to expose me, but instead exposed herself. That night, she broke completely. She sat on the kitchen floor, mascara streaked, clutching an empty wine glass, begging me to tell her what she needed to do to make things right. Her words spilled out in a frantic rush, a mixture of apologies and excuses. I stood in the doorway, calm, detached, watching the woman who once demanded a month without me now pleading for any scrap of attention. I didn't yell. I didn't console. I simply walked away, leaving her sobs echoing through the house. By the weekend, even her friends had stopped answering her calls. She confided in her sister, but even Megan admitted she was tired of the drama. Melissa was no longer the confident woman people admired. She was a shadow of herself, unraveling in full view of everyone she had once tried to impress. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had smirked across the table, daring me to disappear for a month. And I had done exactly that. But now, standing in the wreckage of her own demands, she realized what silence really feels like. And for the first time, she looked terrified of the freedom she had begged for. The 9th week stripped away whatever illusion Melissa had left. The performance was gone, the charm exhausted, the excuses useless. What remained was a woman facing the silence she thought she wanted, and the cost was finally crushing her. It began with money. The credit card she relied on was maxed out, the payments long overdue. She hadn't noticed how much of her life had been cushioned by the quiet precision of my planning: insurance, bills, savings. Without me managing the details, everything slipped. One evening, she called the bank in tears, her voice rising as she argued with a stranger on the other end. I watched from across the room, calm and detached, as she begged for leniency. The call ended with her slamming the phone down, muttering that nothing made sense anymore. The car followed next. Insurance unpaid, registration expired. She came home shaking after being pulled over, ticket in hand, humiliated. She tossed the paper on the counter, demanding I fix it. I told her simply, "This is what living without me looks like." She froze, her anger collapsing into silence, because she finally understood those words weren't a threat. They were reality. Her family grew distant too. Her sister stopped answering late-night calls. Her mother's patience wore thin, telling her she needed to face the choices she made. Even her closest friends had grown tired of the drama. Invitations disappeared. Her social media was quiet. The woman who once thrived on attention now sat alone in a house that no longer felt like hers. One night, she tried again to reach me. She sat across the table, her voice trembling, saying she missed the man who used to take care of everything, who used to make her feel safe. I listened, then told her that man was gone the moment she said she wanted a month without me. Her face broke. She whispered that she hadn't meant it, that she was only testing me. I stood, placed my plate in the sink, and walked away. By the weekend, she was pacing the halls like a ghost, clutching her phone as if waiting for someone to save her. But no one was coming. She had spent weeks performing independence, and now, stripped of her stage, she was left with nothing but silence. Melissa thought she wanted freedom. What she got was emptiness. And she was learning, too late, that once silence settles in, it doesn't let go. The 10th week was the end, though Melissa didn't realize it until the moment I stood by the door with a single bag in my hand. She thought my silence was a phase, that eventually I'd break and return to the man who once carried her through every storm. But the truth was, that man no longer existed. He had walked out the day she smirked and said she wanted a month without me. That Saturday morning, I woke early, moved with the same quiet precision I'd carried through all those weeks. Clothes folded neatly, papers in order, phone wiped clean of her number and photos. I had already shifted the accounts, already made the calls, already prepared every step. All that remained was to leave. Melissa came downstairs to find me by the door. Her eyes widened when she saw the bag. She whispered, asking where I was going. Her voice cracked with fear, and for the first time, she looked like she understood what was about to happen. I told her calmly that I wasn't going anywhere temporary. I was leaving for good. She broke then, the facade shattering completely. She begged me to wait, begged me to talk, begged me to give her another chance. She cried about the memories, about the promises, about the life we had built together. But every word felt like an echo, a desperate attempt to pull me back into a role I had already abandoned. I handed her an envelope. Inside were the divorce papers, signed and final. She stared at them, her hands shaking, whispering that it couldn't be real. But it was. She asked how long I had been planning it. I told her the truth. From the moment she told me she wanted life without me. That was the exact moment I decided she would get it. She reached for me then, tears streaking down her face, but I stepped back. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't angry. I was just done. I picked up my bag, opened the door, and walked into the cool morning air. Behind me, her sobs filled the house, echoing off walls that once held a marriage. I didn't look back, because I didn't need to. I wasn't disappearing. I wasn't running. I was simply finished. Melissa had asked for a month without me, and I had given her that and more. As the door closed behind me, I knew she finally understood. Silence wasn't punishment. It was the answer. And in that silence, she was left with nothing but herself. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.